Let's dive right into the breaking nuclear news of the week. But first up, price action. The Sprott Uranium Miners ETF was down 1.43% of the week. The S&P 500 was up 2.86% on the week. Now, that underperformance in the short term makes sense if you look at the big picture. Over the last year, the Sprott Uranium Miners ETF is up 23%, and the S&P 500 is down 4%. So that massive outperformance speaks to the value of these assets in the long term, because the uranium bull thesis is a long-term thesis. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme overnight. But most great investors, if you look at all the billionaires around the world, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, how did they become billionaires? They held on to their equity for decades, and over time, it grew in value. They are long-term investors, and so are most uranium investors. So let's dive into the news, understand why people are invested in this space. Is the bull case still intact? Last week, I touched on the research report that Morgan Stanley put out, but this comes from Uranium Corgi via John Quakes on Twitter, and we can see that Morgan Stanley is the most bullish on uranium out of all the commodities listed. And this is what Morgan Stanley is saying. In an increasingly bifurcated market, US-EU, demand for non-Russian nuclear fuel will push prices even higher to incentivize spare mine capacity. That is a very concise way of laying out the bull case for uranium. Morgan Stanley, big Wall Street, believes in it. Let's go through this article from Fission Uranium Core. Uranium, what makes it different this time? Growing demand, shrinking stockpiles, struggling supply. The uranium industry has been talking about the same thing for years. So what's different this time around? Well, for instance, you can talk sentiment. What has become nothing less than a sea change in public and government sentiment really gained pace in line with the global drive to decarbonize energy generation. As fans of nuclear power already know, there is simply no feasible way for the world to hit decarbonization targets in the agreed timeframes without expanding nuclear energy generation. That is what I like about the nuclear trade. You can't argue with math. It's all laid out in front of us. There is a supply-demand deficit. There's massively growing demand. There's a shrinking above-ground supply, which is insufficient to meet that demand. And there's a sea change in sentiment, like this article says. You see, there was a large supply overhang for much of the last 10 years. This kept prices low and stockpiles high. Producers eventually cut back and stockpiles began to shrink quickly. We are now in a contracting period accelerated by concerns related to the Ukraine war and the new geopolitics of Eastern Europe, which is moving the contract price upwards. And I don't believe we have approached the upper limit of uranium pricing, not even close. The fact is, demand growth combined with dwindling reserves of existing mines means new production is needed this cycle. For that to happen, prices have to rise further because it costs a lot of money to restart mothballed mines and to build new ones. $95 per pound is more than double the current spot price and long-term price. It's a figure we've not seen since 2007. As the industry's senior and most respected producer, Cameco is quite rightly conservative when it comes to making statements and giving forecasts. If their calculations show that another 100% increase is required, then there is a lot of upside still to come for our sector. Cameco gave a price target of $95 per pound. So that is the very exciting big picture overlook for the long-term bull case for uranium and uranium stocks and uranium exposed stocks. But for now, what happened last week? The Office of Nuclear Energy put out this graphic, which speaks to why this fuel source is so in demand. Fast facts on nuclear energy. Nuclear fuel is extremely energy dense. One uranium pellet is equal to 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas, 120 gallons of oil, 1 ton of coal. So again, with that in mind, breaking news, Russia's President Putin bans unfriendly countries from transactions involving shares in hydrocarbon projects, including users of subsurface allotments containing uranium deposits located in the territory of the Russian Federation. We know the geopolitical tension is not going anywhere anytime soon. Russia is going to be seemingly an enemy of the West for the foreseeable future. And just to give you guys a clear picture Russia enriches the most uranium. Here is just a graphic of how much enriched uranium work units Russia puts out compared to the other big players. And so this is where the term energy security comes from. In case you missed it, world's largest uranium producer, Kazatomprom, reported last week that Kazakhstan's production was down 7% in the second quarter of 2022. Capital expenditures are trending down. There's a shortage of mining supplies. So Kazatomprom is buying uranium again in the spot market alongside the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, taking circulating supply out of the market. And so we have Russia squeezing the global supply, threatening the world, forcing the West to a renaissance in local uranium mining and production, forcing them into it. And so the world is seeing in real time the consequences of a disastrously incompetent energy policy. It's right here in this graphic, which comes from Alessio. Year ahead power prices in Europe, France, and Germany. They didn't invest enough in uranium and nuclear energy production. And so this is what is happening. And so the United States is watching this and understands the assignment. Look at domestic uranium production report in the United States in the second quarter of 2022, down 39% from Q1. Production is practically zero. So the supply-demand deficit is getting worse in front of our very eyes. But thankfully, unlike in some countries in Europe, the United States leadership is actually taking action. The Energy Secretary of the US, nuclear is key to meeting US energy goals. The whole world has to lean into getting to net zero and addressing climate change. Nuclear is such a clear part of that. I meet with my counterparts from all over the world, and everywhere people are looking to us to help them reach their goals with nuclear. And so uranium investors can sleep well at night knowing that the entire power of the US government is supporting the industry they are investing in. And then you have this huge news. Dow, the Dow company, absolutely huge company, is the first manufacturer to announce its intention to develop small modular reactor options to help drive its emissions reductions. We're collaborating with X Energy Nuclear to reduce our CO2 emissions through the development and deployment of X Energy's advanced small modular reactor nuclear technology in the US. We are in the early stages of this nuclear renaissance. The US Energy Secretary said this about this partnership: a great step towards meeting our nation's climate goals. This powerful new partnership will help drive down industrial carbon emissions by deploying advanced small modular nuclear power in the US. And that's not the only signpost of the nuclear renaissance in the US that took place last week. California governor proposes extending nuclear plants' life. So the governor proposed new legislation, which is likely to pass, to extend the life of this plant. And so this story just keeps repeating itself all around the world. Any country that tries to move away from uranium gets forced right back. And so you can ignore the rhetoric of a lot of these countries that speak against it, which there really aren't that many anymore, because you know that they're probably going to do the exact same thing as every other country has done and is doing, which is you turn on nuclear, invest deep into it, because maybe they see what we see, which is that nuclear power will power the future. This comes from Forbes, a new atomic age, bipartisan interest in nuclear energy growing amid rising energy demand. With rising energy demand and concerns about stress on the power grid, many are increasingly eyeing nuclear power, including as yet unperfected fusion. Again, fusion will take a decade, if not more, to come online. So in the meantime, fission, uranium power, infrastructure is what all these countries are investing in. For the long term, including the SMRs, if there was something better than fission nuclear technology, you wouldn't have Dow investing in SMRs. You wouldn't have Rolls-Royce investing in SMRs. You wouldn't have the United States passing an act which throws billions of dollars to the production of fission uranium. You wouldn't have fission uranium plants like the Diablo plant reopening. And you wouldn't have just about every development that we've covered over the last year or so happen which is bullish nuclear. We talked last week about how there was this scare in uranium about a nuclear power plant in Ukraine being shelled or having some sort of military exercises taking place around it. And so there was a scare that possibly a dangerous leak would happen, which would hurt public sentiment towards nuclear. Well, Russia invites nuclear monitors to visit shelled Ukrainian plant. IAEA still needs permission from Kiev to visit. Europe's biggest atomic power station was damaged last week, but Russia told diplomats it's ready to welcome international monitors into the power plant whose safety is in doubt. So clearly Russia is confident that this plant is fine. Maybe there's a little bit of fear mongering around this from parties in that war who want to throw blame on each other, which we did touch on last week. But the reality is that it seems fine and a nothing burger. I love to end on the revolutionary nature of nuclear power technology and infrastructure and what the future might look like for this space. So the Office of Nuclear Energy put out this report. Again, they're pumping nuclear. The US government is pumping nuclear. 3 surprising ways to use nuclear energy. Nuclear desalination, advancements in sewage systems, desalination and wastewater treatment plants significantly improve public health. Still 1/5 of world's population experiences water scarcity. The demand for fresh water continues to grow due to increases in population and impacts of climate change on arid and semi-arid regions. Desalination plants around the world produce fresh water from seawater through distillation. These processes require energy in the form of heat to remove salt from saline water, which in turn makes it drinkable. However, desalination plants are often powered by carbon-emitting heat sources like fossil fuels. Dozens of US nuclear energy companies are currently working on advanced nuclear systems that are carbon-free, can be sited virtually anywhere in the world, and can concurrently produce water and electricity when paired with desalination plants. How revolutionary is that? That this fuel source can literally make it cost-effective to desalinate water and end water scarcity. Absolutely massive. Clean hydrogen production. Hydrogen is a key component of future energy systems and can be generated with little to no emissions with technologies like nuclear energy. To help scale up the production of clean hydrogen, the U.S. Department of Energy is supporting 4 hydrogen demonstration projects at U.S. nuclear plants. The projects are part of the DOE's hydrogen shock goal to reduce the cost of hydrogen to $1 per 1 kilogram in 1 decade, and could also open up new markets for the nuclear industry. When you have a low-cost baseload fuel source, you can do wonders. Process heating for industry. Nuclear power plants produce heat through a process called fission, which is used to make steam that spins a turbine to create electricity. Nuclear reactors convert 1/3 of heat produced into electricity. The remaining heat is released to the environment, which could be harnessed to meet process heat demands. So these are revolutionary use cases of nuclear power. The US government gets it. When you're an early stage investor, you want to see all the stars align, which starts at the top, which is regulation and government. And the government is clearly supporting this industry with tax credits and with stimulus for local production. They also see the future of how revolutionary this could be if we have a inexpensive baseload power source long term. And so because of that, you have huge companies like Dow and Rolls-Royce and others, like we talked about, investing big into it. And so because of that, you're going to drive up the demand of the scarce fuel source, which is in a supply deficit, which is going to cost much higher prices long term, which will benefit all the miners that many of you are investing in, or you're investing in the spot price, or you're investing in revolutionary technology like SMR companies to take advantage of this renaissance for the long term. We will continue to stay on top of this exciting early stage market.